Previously on Bush War.
Die woord communis, dit was die absolute anti-Christ ensovoorts. Maar dit is wat my geïnspireer het en gemotiveer het om te veg vir my land, jy weet.
Ek het altyd vir myself gesê, ek sal vir my land veg. Ek sal vir my land veg. Maak nie saak wie bewind was nie. Behalwe as daar kommunisme bewind was. As daar kommunisme bewind was ek dan het ek 'n vryheidsvegter geword.
From the late 60s onward, there was a red under every bed in white South Africa. Expressions like the communist threat and rooi gevaar, red peril, became part of the lexicon. For those who found Russian equipment and propaganda in camps in Angola and northern Namibia, it was a harsh reality. The enemy was sponsored by the Soviet Union and Cuba, and in the heat of battle, they could lose their lives to a bullet from a Russian weapon. At home, publications circulated with titles like The True Nature of Communism, published by the Commission to Counter Social Evils of the Synod of the Dutch Reformed Church. The chapter headings alone speak volumes. Innocent Appearance of Communism. Stirring up class hatred and class struggle. Revolution, the main aim. Black Republic. The urge to destroy. On a lighter note, many a soldier whiled away the idle hours with stories like Tessa and Grensvechter, in which the bad guys were communists, Russian agents and Cubans.
Natal 1979. Rocco de Wet, bekend as die grensvegter en Karen Berkman, wat soms werk as spioen doen, ontspan. Hulle ken mekaar al 2 jaar lank. Soms is die gesprek lig, ander kere ernstiger soos nou.
Dis waar, Rocco. Die Oost-Duitsers begin hulle sterk vestig in sekere swart state.
Ek weet, ek het baie met hulle te doen gehad.
Hulle is baie gevaarliker as die Kubane. Slimmer, gedigter, sommer net alles.
Natuurlik, Moskou weet hoe om sy kaarte te speel. Cuba se bydra tot ondermyning in Afrika het sy perk bereik. Nou moet Rusland 'n ander pion gebruik. In die geval is dit Oost-Duitsland.
Kom sit, Rocco. Ons het mekaar lanklaas gesien. En hier, ons is alleen. Kom dans, Rocco. Hierdie aand is onsin.
Graag.
En jy moet my beloof.
Wat?
As dit swaar met jou gaan in Angola, dink aan my. Dink aan hierdie aand. Onthou, daar is iemand wat ook aan jou dink. Verlang. Vir jou bid.
Dit beloof ek, want is maklik.
O, Rocco, jy moet veilig terugkeer. Jy moenie so baie waag nie. Beloof jy dit ook?
Ek is nooit onversigtig nie.
Old South Africa would have been stunned to know that their enemies were enjoying these anti-communist sentiments just as much. 20 years later, the Namibian Minister of Defence, Charles Namolo, remembers it with a chuckle.
Books or comics which were in shops, we were buying them also, reading and discussing like other youngsters in the country, whether you are white or black, later zwart, or what is it? Later and zwart. Cake, the cake, the zwarte admiral. We were reading all these comics also.
And your love letters.
And Africans also, we were Africans. We loved the language to a certain extent, especially myself. I loved it only when I write love letters. My liefling, my dear bar, and so forth. When we were writing love letters to our girlfriends, it's all in Afrikaans. We wouldn't write the love letters in English. No, we didn't like them. The wording, maybe only one sentence and then into Afrikaans. You see, it was very sweet. It's a sweet love language, I can say. But we came to hate the language because of their attitudes towards us. We said, if it's their language and they don't like us, then we hate it.
Hatred was born, which would fester for many years on both sides. South Africans saw SWAPO as puppets of communism.
Ons sal in
Suid-Afrika, in Suid-Afrika en in Suid-Afrika, ons moet staan en sterk maak om teen hierdie gedigte vyand van ons, naamlik die kommuniste, veral die Russiese ekspansionisme, te veg.
En ons moes dit keer. En dit sal ek vir die troepie op die grens verduidelik het. Hoe belangrik dit was om dit te keer. Dit het ons gedoen. Die USSR is uiteindelik verslaan. En het ekonomies ineengestort in 3 groot gebiede. Die eerste gebied was die Midde-Ooste, die tweede gebied was Afghanistan en die derde gebied was Suidelike Afrika. En in Suidelike Afrika het ons die rol gespeel om hom uit te mergel. As ons dit nie gedoen het nie, was werklike demokrasie nie in Suider-Afrika nie. Dan het ons hier gesit met 'n klomp kommunistiese satellietstate.
75 years earlier, a completely different relationship existed. In 1900, Russian soldiers came to fight with the Boers against the British oppressor. The Bolsky family's great-grandfather was one of those soldiers.
The story of the family as an architect started from great-grandfather. He was born in 1874 and became a first architect in the family.
He's very popular in Russia. Every architect in our country maybe knew that my grandfather was in Transvaal.
When he was 26 years old, he joined the Russian troops and went in South Africa to fight on the side of Boers against English troops. He spent about 1 year in South Africa, and through this, the word of Boers and the word of South Africa was something like miracle in our family.
This is an article about Англо-Бурская война и воспоминания русского волонтера. Так.
The war with English and Boers and remembers of the Russian volunteer.
He was in the security team around Kruger, and when Kruger was leaving the country, they were discussing with Kruger the problems of the end of the war, and everybody understood that the war is, they lost the war.
In total, 225 Russian volunteers came to South Africa to support the Boers, some as soldiers, others as medical personnel. Back home, there was huge support for what they did.
Everybody knew that he was in the war in South Africa. Everybody started to sing this song about Transvaal, Transvaal.
Transvaal, Transvaal, страна родная. Это вот very popular song. And мама, купи мне пушку, барабан, я поеду к бурам бить англичан.
So in English it will say like, mother bought me a gun and a rifle, and I shall go and I shall join Boers to beat English. He always underlined that when he tell about his involvement in Boers war, everybody was very excited and started to support him and started to sing songs, and that it was very sensitive somewhere in the spirit of Russians who remembered the times of the beginning of the century of this war.
The sympathy between Afrikaners and Russians remained intact throughout the first decades of the 20th century. Even communism, later such a swear word, had strong appeal. That was clear during the workers' demonstrations of 1922.
In 1922 was daar reeds meer Afrikaner werkers, of veral in die myne, as Engelssprekende, ek praat van wit werkers. En dis baie goed bekend dat daar hierdie beroemde mars in 1922 was, waar onder leiding van Afrikaner werkers daar aktief gesê is, ons beëiwer ons vir 'n kommunistiese bestel, ten einde ons situasie te verbeter.
In the Second World War, South African soldiers fought with the Soviet Union and other Allied nations, among them Britain, against Hitler's Germany. Ordinary members of the public organized drives like giving blood specifically for Russian soldiers. But a large number of people, especially Afrikaners, were strongly against cooperation with the British, whom they still regarded as the enemy of a short 40 years earlier.
Ons moet een ding onthou van die 40er jare. Stalin en die Russe het saam met die geallieerdes geveg teen Hitler, né? En daar was onder Afrikaners 'n geweldige groot simpatie gewees met Hitler, omdat hy 'n vyand was van die Engelse. Dit was daai standpunt van my enemy's enemy is my friend. Verder is interessant dat in 1950 is die wet op die onderdrukking van kommunisme ook aanvaar. So wat gebeur het is dat daar is 'n duidelike alliansie aangegaan tussen Afrikaner nasionalisme, Christendom en kapitalisme.
Meanwhile, black South African politicians had been making contact with Moscow over many years. In 1927, the president of the ANC visited the city. Over the following decades, hundreds of ANC cadres were trained in the Soviet Union. Namibian liberation movements followed the same pattern. As the war on the subcontinent intensified, that support increased.
A period of time during which the Soviets took every advantage to deploy their forces and to project their power, both land power and air power, and to some extent naval power, into the developing world, the third world.
This was the struggle within the framework of the global split of the world, the contraposition between the military blocs. Africa was a collision center, the Middle East was a collision center, Asia, Cambodia, same thing.
Центральная Америка.
This international power game would change the lives of thousands of ordinary soldiers in Russia, South Africa, Cuba, Angola, and Namibia forever over the next couple of decades. The bigger picture was not always clear when you were staring down the barrel of a gun. At the time, SWAPO used neighbouring African states as bases and launching pads for attacks into Namibia. In the Angolan cauldron, 3 other guerrilla movements were fighting it out. The Soviet Union supported SWAPO as well as the MPLA in Angola. South Africa, in its turn, supported UNITA and the FNLA. Soviet soldiers were deployed as advisors in Angola from the mid-70s until the late 80s.
Because if not we, Americans could be there. That is all. Because practically all the time, the great states, great powers, yes, they have their own conflict between each other.
Anyway, war is war. It was big politics.
This is what was used by the South Africans, that those are communists. They are surrogates of the Russians, surrogates of the China, surrogates of communists, what, everything, just to discredit our endeavor to liberate ourselves. And it is not that we wanted only to go to the communist or socialist countries, because they were willing to help us. If you can't help us, we go to those who are willing to help us.
Speaking about the puppet, why puppet? We were soldiers. And South Africans were also soldiers.
We were a military part of that politics, instrument of that politics.
Not only soldiers were instruments of politics.
At that time, Angola was supported by the Soviet Union, and it got all the armament, practically all the armament from the Soviet Union and of course from the socialist countries. I saw the armament from German Democratic Republic, from Bulgaria, from Czechoslovakia. But at the same time, when we fought against the UNITA and South Africa, we captured, for example, in their bases, for example, after the battles, we captured Chinese, Israel, and American, of course, Belgian rifles and machine guns and so on, so everything.
The weapons were delivered and utilized. The soldiers had to look after themselves.
The Soviets had to report to the High Command, and the High Command told her, listen, you need to stay there, you must stay there with Angolan troops, but take care of your security. In what way to take care of our security, we didn't know, but take care of your security, but you just stay with Angolan troops.
Security in a war zone like Angola in those years was not something you could count on. Being wounded or captured was a daily possibility. During Operation Protea in 1981, the capture of a Soviet sergeant major made headlines. Here's how the SADF reported it.
Hy het terugbeweeg na die peloton toe om aan te sluit by hulle en om te onttrek na sy tydelike basis toe. En tydens die terugbeweging is daar op hulle gevuur vanaf skuins agter hulle. Hulle het omgedraai en die vuur beantwoord en op die daaropvolgende deursoeking het hulle toe hierdie lewendige rus plus die dooies daar gekry.
According to the Institute of African Studies in Moscow, Nikolai now farms in rural Russia.
If I didn't want to go to Africa, or anybody of my friends who didn't want to go to Africa, they could have written a report, I don't want to go. And he would not go. That's it. Problem is solved. We have to understand any military is an instrument which sometimes participate in combat actions. We cannot escape that. And if a parent of South African soldier who has died while fighting Namibians trained by me, I would have answered, I think, the same way. He's a soldier. Soldiers are dying sometimes in battle. What to do? We are paid for that.
We were taught and we were instructed to help our brothers in order to gain their independence, in order to have their country flourishing and so on, in order to repel all the attacks of the international imperialism and so on.
Namibians, people who lived there thousands of years, they wanted to live there the way they wanted. They have their right to struggle for the way they wanted to live.
Many of them really wanted to get this help from us, you see, and so, as you say, I identify myself with those purposes. Of course, we are identified.
They were comrades in arms. They were always ready to sacrifice with us. And the little they had to share with us. So they were real comrades, and they will teach you how to survive under very difficult circumstances.
They have the right to apply to anybody to help them to be trained. If we didn't come there to train them, definitely the vacuum would be filled by somebody else who is more bloodthirsty than the Soviet officer. We didn't tell them to cut throats of the victims. Never, never, ever.
It was not always easy for the Russian advisors to adapt to what they found in the field in Angola.
I don't want to offend Angolan soldiers now.
Some of them had nothing, neither skills nor wish to struggle, just to eat, to drink, to dance, and nothing more.
They say that the SWAPO cadres were different.
I enjoyed the moment when I could distinguish immediately. This is SWAPO soldier, this is Angolan soldier. A SWAPO soldier, when he was walking through the streets of Lubango, maybe in old uniform, maybe, but it is always nicely washed. It is always pressed. Their shoes are polished, if not by that polisher, standard polisher, at least by the fat of meat he is eating, but it is polished. When Angolan soldiers sometimes would have one boot broken and never repaired, and never uniform is not pressed.
But how did they experience South African soldiers?
South African troops were very well organized, were very well trained, very well professional, you see. They were the real professional troops, and they knew what for they were fighting, you see. And of course, they got a very good salary.
The war did not occupy every waking moment. They also have other memories.
Best memory? I told you, a very good nature, very beautiful nature of Angola. Well, of course, you do not remember bad things, you remember only good things. I remember a lot of good things, you see. And I had a very good possibility to see everything with my own eyes, you see, and to touch with my own hands, and to swim in African rivers, and to swim in the Atlantic Ocean, and to cross the country in the vehicle, you see, and to fly all the country.
But they were very clear on what they were fighting for.
So I do remember those times with biggest pleasure, and the fact that I estimate that they are now in Namibia. Well, I hope that a piece of my invention is also there. I also help them to be there in a democratic society, and I also envy the way Namibians managed to reconcile the country. Unfortunately, here in the Soviet Union, we were remembering who was on the white guy's side, on the Red Army side, till now.
Basic differences sometimes made more of an impression than ideology.
To say the truth, we considered the United troops as the enemies. And the majority of Russians did not consider South Africans. Maybe because I'm not a racist, but maybe because of they were white people, you see, and we were white people. I learned a very good rule from Africa from the very beginning. If you see a white man in Africa, just from the very beginning, he is your friend. Because there were not so many whites, for example, in Angola and in Mozambique. And if you see a white man, your honor and your debt is to help him if he has some troubles.
11 years after the war, Igor Zhdarkin ran into a South African soldier in Mozambique. During the struggle, they were on opposite sides of the firing line.
He asked me, "Aren't you angry?" Why? What for? How can I be angry with you if you just fulfilled your part of your debt? I fulfilled my debt, and that is all.
Next up on Bush War, Operation Savannah, 3,000 kilometers through the Angolan bush.